My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 29. The night my mom went on X to celebrate me finally moving out, I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my new studio apartment, eating cold takeout straight from the box. I opened the app and there it was, sitting right at the top of my feed. Her post was already picking up speed. You should have left sooner anyway. No more feeding a pig. The little heart count was climbing past 1,800 likes. Complete strangers were dropping laughing emojis like they knew my life story. My aunt jumped in first, mentioning how I cried over a Starbucks rejection at 23, as if one interview had defined my whole existence. My dad added before and after photos, my old bedroom, messy from late-night laptop sessions, compared to his new man cave with a TV mounted and my shelves ripped off. My younger sister tagged all her friends and wrote, "Warning, this is what happens if you date gamers," even though most nights I was working, not playing. I scrolled through every comment, every joke, every stranger agreeing that I was some lazy adult child finally escaping my parents' home. What none of them realized was that the house they were laughing about was legally mine. The mortgage had been paid off years ago by my grandmother. And for years, I had quietly been transferring money every month to people who never once treated me like an adult. That night, I didn't reply, I didn't argue. I just saved every screenshot, closed the app, and let them enjoy their little victory. Because if you think that post was just a joke, wait until you see what happened when I finally decided to tell the internet the whole story. One screenshot and one overlooked detail turned that funny post into the most expensive lesson my family ever learned. To understand that night, you need to know where it all began. I grew up in a beige two-story house in Aurora, just outside Denver. The kind of neighborhood where every driveway had the same crack down the middle and every neighbor had seen you mow the lawn in pajamas at least once. That house didn't come from my parents' hard work. My grandmother bought it long before I was born, paying it off with decades of nursing shifts and endless overtime. When I was 22, she passed away. A few weeks later, we sat in a cramped attorney's office while he read her will. That was the first time I heard my full name said like it mattered. The house, the one my parents had called our home my entire life, was left to me. Not my mom. Not my stepdad. Me. The lawyer explained it carefully. My grandmother didn't trust Gary with money. He had a history of borrowing and not paying people back. She loved my mom, but she wanted one family member to have something nobody could take away. I remember my mom going pale for a moment, then smoothing her expression like she'd decided to act like it wasn't a big deal. Gary laughed it off, saying it was all in the family, like paperwork was just decoration. I was grieving the only person who ever told me I was brilliant without adding a "but," so I didn't argue when my mom suggested nothing needed to change. They'd keep paying the bills. I could stay while I figured out my life. Everything would go on as usual. A few months later, she slid an envelope across the kitchen table and called it a grown-up step. She said I should contribute $400 a month to help with utilities and groceries, to teach responsibility. On paper, it sounded fair. I was working part-time as a barista and trying to land a real job, so I agreed. What nobody said out loud was that I was now paying rent for a house that was legally mine, while the adults who constantly complained about money lived there for free. Around 23, I had my failure moment, the one my aunt loved to bring up online. I had applied for a Starbucks corporate role, not a store job, and made it to the final round. I cared way too much, stayed up all night redesigning mock-ups. When the rejection email came, I cried in my car before my shift. That story became a family joke. Every holiday, every birthday, remember when Natalie cried over Starbucks like it was Harvard? From then on, anything I tried became a punchline before it could become real. While they laughed, I taught myself UX design and social media strategy online. I took tiny freelance gigs, basic websites for local shops, managing Instagram pages for people who barely knew how to post. I would sit at my messy desk until 2 a.m., tweaking wireframes and scheduling campaigns while everyone assumed I was gaming. When I mentioned client calls, my mom said, "So, another pretend job?" Gary asked if I had applied at the warehouse yet. My sister Lily rolled her eyes and told her friends I just stayed in my room playing with Canva. Every month, $400 left my account labeled house money, while I also bought my own food, clothes, and equipment. Whenever I mentioned that the house was legally mine, Gary shut it down. You live under my roof. You follow my rules. The longer it went on, the less I spoke. It was easier to let them believe I was lazy than to fight over every invoice, every call, every project. I built my career quietly, client by client. Until one day, my income from fake internet work, as Gary liked to call it, was more than both of my parents' paychecks combined. Yet at dinner, I still heard them complain about adult children leeching off their parents. In the living room my grandmother had left to me, under a roof with my name on the deed. The bitterness didn't explode at once. It settled slowly, layer by layer, like dust in the corners of my room, waiting for someone to open a window and notice how much had built up. Around that time, I started dating Marcus. We met through a mutual friend at a barbecue, and he liked that I was creative. He sold trucks at a dealership and wore fitted shirts and watches he couldn't really afford. On our third date, he asked where I lived. I told him I live with my parents in Aurora and watched his face flicker before forcing a smile. I didn't mention that the deed was in my name. Even I sometimes found it unbelievable, like bragging. The first time he came over, my mom switched to her nice voice, asking 100 questions about his job. Gary joked that maybe Marcus could talk some sense into me and get me to apply at the warehouse. Lily rolled her eyes and said she'd been trying to be a designer for years. I laughed it off, apologized to Marcus for the circus, and he shrugged. Families are families. Still, any conversation about where I lived made things tense. As my client list grew and savings climbed, the comments at home got sharper. If I worked late, my mom would complain she was tired of cooking for a grown child who never leaves the house. If I made my own meals, she'd gripe that I was eating like a stranger. Gary would complain about utilities, blaming my computers, then blast the TV all night. Every month I sent $400 labeled as a house contribution, and every month, at least one of them made a joke about how generous they were for letting me stay. I started tracking everything, partly for taxes, partly to stay sane. I had spreadsheets for invoices, income projections, software, gear, and one quiet tab labeled house, tallying every $400 transfer since I was 22. One night, after a fight where my mom called me ungrateful for not emptying the dishwasher fast enough, I looked at that number at the bottom of the column. Tens of thousands of dollars. For a house my grandmother had died to pay off. A house my parents were mocking me in. That was the first time anger outweighed guilt. The second time it hit was when Marcus and I had been dating a little over a year, and the topic of moving in together came up. He said his lease was ending, didn't want to keep saying his girlfriend lived with her parents, and suggested we find a downtown apartment together. I told him I was already helping with the house and that he could move into the spare room temporarily to save money. He looked at me like I'd said something ridiculous. "I'm not moving in with your parents," he said. "That's not normal, Nat." I quietly told him the truth. The house was mine legally. My grandmother had left it to me. My parents were living there rent-free. He laughed. Honestly, he thought I was joking. "If it's your house, why are you paying them rent? Why does your mom act like she's doing you a favor?" I didn't have a good answer. Any explanation sounded like I was excusing being treated like a child. 2 weeks later, after a fight where he accused me of choosing comfort over growth, Marcus broke up with me in a Chili's parking lot. He said he couldn't build a future with someone stuck in their parents' house, then drove off. I stood under the fluorescent lights, thinking, I owned a house and still looked like a dependent to the outside world. On the drive home, I made a decision. I was done letting others define my life. Back in my room, I opened my laptop, pulled up spreadsheets, and called a mortgage advisor. When she saw my income and savings, she was impressed. We talked condos near downtown Denver, neighborhoods with coffee shops and co-working spaces where my work wouldn't be a joke. Within a few months, after viewings, paperwork, and digital signatures, I had an accepted offer on a small studio with big windows and city lights. I didn't tell my family until everything was finalized. On closing day, I signed the last document on a tablet, got the key, and drove over alone. I stood in the empty space, listening to my footsteps echo. For the first time in years, the quiet felt like freedom, not failure. That night, I drove back to Aurora, packed my things in boxes, and circled a move date on the calendar. My mom complained about feeding a grown child, Gary about clutter, Lily joked about gaming, but none of it stuck. I had a new address, and soon I would live exactly as my grandmother intended, in control, and everyone else forced to deal with it. Moving day didn't feel dramatic at first. It was just a Saturday where everyone woke up already annoyed at each other. I had been quietly packing all week, folding my life into cardboard boxes in the corner of my room while my mom muttered about tripping over them and Gary grumbled about clutter. That morning, I came downstairs with my keys hooked on my finger and told them calmly that the movers would be there in an hour and I'd be out by tonight. My mom stared like I'd announced I was joining a cult. Out where? She asked. I told her I had bought a place closer to downtown, a small studio, nothing crazy, but mine. She blinked, laughed, a light disbelieving laugh that made my skin crawl. With what money, Natalie? You don't even have a real job. Gary chimed in from the couch, not looking away from the TV. About time. I learned what real bills felt like, what it meant to really handle rent and utilities, and I expected to crawl back when it all hit at once. Lily walked in halfway through, holding her phone, and said, "You're actually moving. Not just threatening with movers." I nodded. She shrugged, half amused, like she could barely wait to tell her friends. When the moving truck pulled up, there was this weird shuffle of bodies at the door. Everyone pretended they didn't want to watch but couldn't look away. The movers carried out box after box, my monitors, my chair, the little things I'd bought with money they pretended didn't exist. My mom kept muttering about how I'd better remember who fed me all these years. Gary joked about turning my old room into a home gym or game room. Nobody said they'd miss me. Nobody asked for my new address. I did one last walkthrough, fingers brushing the wall where my grandmother used to lean to say goodnight. Then I walked out with my backpack and laundry bag slung over my shoulder. No big speech. Just a quiet goodbye to a house that never really felt like mine, even if the deed said otherwise. The drive to my new place took 25 minutes, but felt like crossing a border. The studio was mostly empty when I arrived, just a mattress on the floor, a few boxes, my laptop, and the city outside the window. I set my phone on the counter, ordered cheap Chinese food, and spent an hour assembling a wobbly Target table while some streaming show played in the background. For the first time in years, the silence around me didn't feel like judgment. It felt like a reset. Only after eating half my lo mein straight from the carton did I pick up my phone again. There was a little red dot I couldn't ignore. At the top of my feed was my mom's post. "Cheers to finally not feeding a grown child anymore. You should have left earlier. Haha. No more feeding a pig." Hundreds of likes piling up. Strangers replying with laughing emojis. A few swipes down, my Aunt Denise had replied. Remember when she cried at 23 because Starbucks rejected her? Still unemployed in her late 20s, some people never learn. Gary had quote tweeted it, side-by-side collage included, my old room, messy with boxes and clothes, versus now with my desk gone, a cheap recliner, and a big flat screen on the wall. Caption: From disaster zone to man cave in one day. Guess we finally got our house back. Lily had tagged half her contacts, warning, "Your future if you date gamers." Like that, my whole career, years of effort, learning, freelancing, reduced to a joke about video games. I noticed something quieter. Marcus had liked my mom's post. No comment. No message. Just a small heart. As if agreeing I was the problem. For a second, my chest heated, my throat tightened, I felt exposed. Then something sharper cut through. All these people were laughing about me moving out, thinking my parents were doing me a favor. None of them knew I had been paying $400 a month to live in my own house while they stayed rent-free. None of them knew my grandmother had left that house specifically to me so Gary couldn't borrow or lose it. None of them knew I was sitting in a condo I bought myself, funded by the very work they mocked. I scrolled back to the top of the thread. Took a deep breath. Started saving. Screenshot of my mom's post. Screenshot of Denise's Starbucks joke. Screenshot of Gary's man cave collage. Screenshot of Lily's dating gamers warning. I captured likes, usernames, timestamps, every small detail. Then I closed X, opened my banking app, flipping through years of $400 transfers labeled house money and my scanned copy of my grandmother's will in cloud storage. Receipts stacked on receipts. I could have replied immediately, dropped everything in a quote tweet, watched their little victory crumble in real time. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. But anger is one thing. Strategy is another. I set a reminder for 12 days later. Then I laid my phone face down on the floor, stared at the ceiling, and thought, let them enjoy the joke. Let them think they finally got rid of the pig. 12 days later, my reminder went off while I was making coffee in my tiny kitchen. I stared at the notification for a moment, then opened X. My mom's post was still there pinned, still full of strangers laughing and thinking they knew my life from a caption about feeding a pig. I scrolled through it once more to make sure I had every angle covered. Then I opened my laptop and started building my own thread. I didn't start with anger or ranting. I started with facts. The first image, a clean, cropped screenshot of my mom's post, same caption, same likes, same laughing faces. Below it, I wrote in plain text that this was my mother celebrating that her 29-year-old daughter had finally moved out after years of freeloading. The next image, a scan of my grandmother's will, with sensitive info blacked out except for one line, my full name as sole beneficiary of the Aurora property. I highlighted it in yellow before exporting. Under that, I explained that my grandmother had paid off the house with decades of nursing shifts and intentionally left it to me because she didn't trust my stepdad with money. Next came a screenshot from my banking app, edited to hide account numbers, showing 8 years of monthly $400 transfers labeled house money, adding up to tens of thousands. Then a screenshot of my client dashboard, names blurred but numbers visible, showing my yearly income as a freelance UX designer and social media strategist. Not bragging. Just proof that I was never the unemployed leech my family painted me to be. I added a caption tying it all together. The pig in my mother's joke had bought her own condo in Denver, funded by work my family mocked. The room my dad had turned into a man cave was in a house he never paid a mortgage on. And one simple line to close. If you're going to drag your own kid online for clout, at least make sure they aren't the one who owns the roof over your head. I paused, finger hovering above the trackpad. I knew once I hit post, there was no undo. I thought of my grandmother, how angry she would be if she saw how my parents spoke of me regarding the house she worked herself sick to leave. I thought of every time my mom had rolled her eyes at my work, every time Gary threw my house and rules in my face, every time Lily laughed at me in front of friends. Then I posted. At first, nothing happened. A few followers liked it. A couple of mutuals replied, "Holy shit. I'm so sorry." Then a small account sharing freelancer horror stories quote tweeted it. "This is why so many of us move in silence." That pulled another audience. A women in tech community saw it next, adding their own quote tweet about respecting daughters. A local Denver meme page reposted the screenshots, captioning it, "Colorado parents thinking kids' online work isn't real." Notifications turned into a slot machine. My phone buzzed constantly. Comments poured in from strangers who sounded like me, kids whose work or art was dismissed as not real. Some were mad for me. Others were grateful someone had spoken the truth. Then it found its way home. I didn't need to witness my mom discovering it to know it had happened. First came a text. "Call me right now." Then, "This is not funny, Natalie." Missed calls. 3 more. Voicemails. Gary's number popped up next, followed by a text. "We need to handle this like adults. You're making the family look bad." Lily sent a string of messages. "What are you doing? You're taking this too far. We're family. You don't air everything online." Denise called to lecture me about how my grandmother never meant for this kind of drama, conveniently ignoring that she had spent years turning the Starbucks story into a circus. I put my phone on silent and watched unread numbers climb. Every new message only fueled the thread shares. Strangers who lived just 2 streets away commented, finally seeing my mom's post in a new light. My classmates, neighbors, Even moms from my high school PTA pieced it together. They realized the side-by-side screenshots were the same posts I had captured. In hours, the balance flipped. Now, my family was the one being dissected by strangers, judged from a distance. Public humiliation wasn't my goal. I still felt guilt watching it unfold. But there was also a sharp satisfaction seeing people finally call out what I had endured since I was 22. And the truth, all I had done was show facts. I hadn't mentioned every cruel comment, every joke about my work, or the biggest card I held, the legal reality of the house. The post was the first push. The real consequences, the ones that would truly change everything, were still coming. The fallout started faster than I expected. 2 days after my thread went up, I woke up to 3 missed calls from my mom and a text from Lily. You need to answer them. This is blowing up. When I checked notifications, I saw why. Someone had screenshotted my thread and shared it in a local Denver Facebook group. From there, it spread to a neighborhood app and a private chat run by one of my mom's coworkers. Patients at her dental office started recognizing her from X. One woman walked up and said, "You're the mom who called your own daughter a pig online in front of the waiting room." Sandra called me, sobbing, furious. "You ruined my life over one joke." At Gary's warehouse, a coworker showed the man cave tweet to their supervisor. It wasn't that he broke a rule, but suddenly, the jokes about my house and his borrowing made sense to people. A few creditors started loudly asking when he'd pay them back. The company realized he was living rent-free in a house he didn't own. His hours were cut. Bonuses vanished. Lily wasn't spared either. She worked in HR at a logistics company known for its culture-first talk. A coworker saw the thread, recognized her last name, and sent it to her manager. She later told me she had to sit in a conference room while her boss questioned why her name was attached to mocking posts. She got a formal warning for unprofessional public conduct. I printed a copy of my grandmother's will, highlighted the house details, and neatly assembled my house money spreadsheet. I called the county office to confirm. Yes, the deed was in my name alone. Selling was straightforward. Next, I met with a real estate agent. I didn't tell my family yet. Instead, I emailed them short, dry, landlord style. As the legal owner of the Aurora property, you have 2 options. 1. Formalize a rental agreement with market rent and utilities. 2. Vacate so I can sell. You have 30 days to respond. Attachments included the deed showing my name. Within an hour, my phone exploded. My mom was angry, hurt. Gary tried to bluff, claiming he could fight it in court. Lily surprised me. "Can we talk in person somewhere private?" We met at a bland chain restaurant. Fluorescent lights, sticky menus, tension thick in the air. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then my mom launched into a speech about sacrifice, how she'd worked so hard, and how the internet didn't need to know our business. Gary lectured me about loyalty, about keeping family problems inside, ignoring that I'd been doing that for years. When I finally spoke, I didn't yell. I laid the folder on the table, opened to the highlighted will, and slid it toward them. I calmly reminded them, this house was left to me by someone who trusted me with it. I pointed out that for 8 years, I had paid $400 every month to live there while they lived rent-free. Lily admitted she had known about the will but never considered what it meant. She had joined in on the jokes because it was easier than defending me. She said she deleted her comments and locked her profile after my thread blew up. My mom sniffled, saying it didn't erase humiliation at work. Gary muttered that men at the warehouse would never let him live it down. I shrugged. The humiliation they were feeling now was only a fraction of what I'd endured while they painted me as a lazy freeloader. I brought it back to practical terms. I wasn't going to be their invisible landlord anymore. They had 30 days to sign a fair lease or move out so I could sell. When the 30 days ended, no lease had been agreed on. They packed their things and moved into a small rental they could actually afford and whatever work Gary could scrape together. I signed the listing agreement with my agent the next day. Weeks later, after open houses and offers, the house sold. The proceeds hit my account, more money than I had ever seen in one place. My grandmother's labor and my own finally converted into something I could steer. The house was gone, but so was the version of me who stayed quiet while everyone else laughed. I didn't splurge on luxury. I bought a heavy wooden desk that didn't wobble, set it by my window, and made that corner my command center. I rented a small office downtown, 2 rooms, cheap rent, good light, and put my name on the door, Brooke Studio. Clients came, shook my hand, looked around at framed mock-ups, and said, "So this is where the magic happens." For years, my work had been invisible, dismissed as a hobby. Now it looked like what it always was, real. With financial cushion, I could say no to toxic clients, hire a part-time assistant, and ensure she never had to apologize for working from a laptop. The story didn't stay contained to X. Summaries went to Reddit, TikTok, podcasts. People argued about whether I'd gone too far or whether selling the house was justified. Every time it resurfaced, my follower count grew. Messages poured in from people whose families had dismissed them, just as mine had. I answered as many as I could. I told them what I wish someone had told me at 22. You're allowed to set boundaries. Family giving you life isn't a blank check to erase your self-respect. Work that happens on a screen is still work. My mom, Sandra, and Gary ended up in a small 2-bedroom in a cheaper suburb. Gary bounced between temp jobs before settling into night shifts. My mom kept her position at the dental office, but lost extra hours she previously counted on. Birthdays passed with only a text or forwarded meme. It would be easy to say it felt good, that cutting them off was clean. But grief is messy, even when you are the one packing boxes. Lily was the first bridge back. She came to see my studio, nervous, quiet, stood in the doorway like she had walked into another universe. She apologized not just for the tweets, but for every time she had avoided defending me. She admitted my thread forced her to look at herself in a new light. We're not best friends, but we talk. I send her job postings, she shares articles about workplace boundaries. Small, real gestures. I didn't tell the story for internet clout. I told it because for years I let their version of me dominate. Publicly sharing the truth wasn't revenge. It was putting facts next to the punchline, letting people decide what mattered more. The lesson: don't humiliate your children for entertainment. Don't dismiss their work as not real. One day, the kid you call lazy might be the one signing the papers deciding where you sleep. My mom's post was supposed to be the punchline of my adulthood. Instead, it marked a new chapter. A chapter where I stopped playing the ungrateful child and began acting as the owner of my own life. The internet didn't fix my family. It didn't make life fair. But it forced them to see, for the first time, the reality they had ignored. And for me, that was enough. I moved on, without looking back, carrying the lessons, the quiet triumph, and the freedom that comes from finally living life on your own terms.